Sean Grande, future Hall of Famer.
You know somebody who knows somebody?
I have a couple of connections.
It's funny. That's become sort of a bit that I've done for a while. It's more of a, often I'll do podcasts or interviews and I'll just go, I have fun playing heel wrestler.
Yeah.
And that's the line. And sometimes once in a while, if somebody gets I'm pretty lucky on social media. I'm fairly tenured. I don't get a lot of grief, but once in a while,
sure,
somebody will act out and I'll give them that. Well, I guess you won't be I won't hold a ticket for you for my Hall of Fame induction. Kind of thing.
There's a lot of fun in being the heel.
Oh my God. I used to love it especially because for years, the podcast, they would have like Mike Gorman on and then they would have me on, especially coming on like after Mike. It was a lot easier to play play the heel, but it's a lot more fun. That's why wrestlers like to do it. That's why they always prefer it. It's the cool thing to do. It's fun to step out of character. I did it when I first came here because to a Celtics audience, obviously I've been in Boston on the air for years, but Max was just, the affable, lovable Cedric Maxwell. And so it was easier for me to play that part. Then you realize Max is just a natural heel. Like he was born to it. So as the guy who famously, in the summers, what'd you do in your summer, Max? So I drove around and watched people work. What he did after he got his contract. What's really cool is watching Max have this second life with the 30 for 30s and the Celtic cities and great. This is a true story. Jayson Tatum, after the 30 for 30, the Celtics Laker one, which I want to say 2017 somewhere. I remember the day he shot that. And he's always like, oh, I got to go do another one of these things. I'm like, dude, this is going to be awesome. People are going to watch this forever.
Yeah.
And Jayson Tatum I think was a rookie or going into his second year. And like his relationship with Max was different after that. Like he had so much more street cred. Max did.
Yeah.
With the 30 for 30s. And I think Celtic City is going to be that same way, that people don't, you see people just knew Tommy as Shrek, his last few years. And you forgot that not only he's like a Hall of Fame player and a Hall of Fame coach, but you constantly have to remind. That's sort of the difficulty and the beauty of my job is constantly reinventing and knowing that you're older than you think you are and your audience is constantly changing. And, you're not the young guy anymore. You're not the old guy. But it was funny in this town for me, after all these years of being the super young guy, I look around and then Mike retired and Jack Edwards is gone and Joe Castiglione is gone. And I'm like, whoa, that happened fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
you're the old guy.
Yeah. All of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I'm, when I first got here, I remember for years, I'm with Mike and Tommy and Max.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about movies and like, oh man, The Dirty Dozen, isn't that a great movie? And I'd be sitting in the back of the book going, God, how old are these guys? And then suddenly it happens to you. I remember writing a column about the Celtics in 2008, how Miami had been the really good team. And then Miami was terrible that year. And it was a column basically using the movie Trading Places to assign characters, and you're nodding because you're old too. And all of a sudden, they hit me like, as I was finishing it, I'm like, that movie is 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of a sudden, it happened. So, and that is the interesting part of my job in a increasingly narrow. You know who your audience is for the most part. You have a pretty good idea demographically, but my audience, calling games, if you're on TV, radio, wherever you're doing it for Celtics, there's people that are 90 and people that are 9.
Yeah.
So it's a different challenge to make sure everybody feels welcome. And, so when Max references Bonanza or something like that, I'm like, dude, come on. Like when music's playing in the arena, I'm like, this is Chapel Roan, dude. Like,
yeah.
He's very dismissive. You got to learn. You can't tune out. You have to constantly, it's helped me in large part that my son is 13.
Yeah.
Now I'm back, obviously they're trying to stay ahead of us with the language. And I often dare him. I'm going to use that on the air. He's like, Dad, don't say Riz on the air. Don't do it. I'm like, yep, Jaylen Brown, Rise and Riz. I'm like, no, I'm not really going to do it. But you have to know how everybody, it's the same. Like, how are people taking in the games? Or people are listening to you? I listen to podcasts now the way I used to read the beat writer stories about the game. I want to hear what you have to say after the game and what the different podcasts say about the game to see if I got it right in real time.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
I first broke into the league with Minnesota, I'm doing the games on TV for the Timberwolves. Steve Ashburner, who's still at NBA.com, was the beat
Yeah.
writer. And my first test as 26-year-old TV voice of the Wolves was when I read Steve Ashburner's story the next day when we had newspapers, kids, you had to wait till the next day. When you first see a newspaper online at midnight, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, yeah.
The next morning, it was awesome. But I would read his game story, and that would tell me if I got it right, if I had my finger on the pulse of the game and what mattered and what didn't.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that because I remember producing overnight news at WBZ, and when newspapers started coming out online overnight, I'd be like, "Oh my God, we don't have to wait till 4 a.m.
Yep.
If the Globe has an exclusive that it's going to be like driving the news cycle the next day, we got it early, and we can actually prepare and do something rather than scrambling." So it's funny that you mentioned that.
And you think my son has any idea what a newspaper is?
No, probably
Do you
not.
do you think he's going to know what cable television was? Nope.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Nope. We have revolution. Another topic for another time. There is revolution coming to the way NBA games are, and sports, pro sports in general, but specifically in the NBA, how games are going to be televised.
Oh, for sure.
In the next couple of years, it's dramatic change coming.
Well, that sounds like a great tease for a podcast that we haven't even conceptualized yet. But let's you and I focus in on this season, because the reason why I wanted you on this particular show is no one is more in tune to what this season was than you. Like you have everything down to like the most granular level. Like you have stats that I didn't even know existed sometimes.
How do you know I'm not making them up?
I just trust you. I don't know why I do. I don't know. It might be my biggest mistake, but
I should once in a while put stuff in there just to see if anybody's paying attention. Like this is this is the most threes anyone's ever hit on a Thursday, just to see if anyone's
okay. Here's that right there is why I know you're not making it up, because you are too focused on the stat. Like you're not even. I don't even know if you have the wherewithal to actually come up with a believable fake stat. Which is a challenge. This is a challenge for you now.
You know what's really funny about it? I do, when I'm listening to you and I hear you talk now, I realize now I use social media as a supplement to the broadcast. It gets me in trouble sometimes because people want to argue about everything. So you'll put up a stat that says, hey, Marcus Smart just passed Larry Bird on the all-time, whatever, on the three-point list. How can you say Marcus Smart's a better shooter than Larry? Didn't actually say that. But my general message is, I appreciate everybody. And this is the problem that the social media following, especially when things start bouncing around, becomes much larger than my audience. So it is a supplement to the broadcast. If you don't have time or the inclination and you're at the games, you're not listening to the broadcast, 99% of the time. A lot of people aren't. But my feeling often is like, well, get the notes from a classmate then, because this is supplementing stuff I'm doing on the air. And what I use social media for is to share. I'm prepping for the next game. That's just sort of a fancy way to make it look, because I'm putting that in my book for the next game, for the next pregame show. When we recap the last game, I'm going to say some of those things that happened in the last game. And it sort of helps me obviously document it as it's going along. But everything, it's almost more of an insight to like that Dick Lipe do what Dick Lipe does. Mine is more of an insight into the play-by-play voice of a team and how I catalog stuff throughout the course of the year. I do 20, 30, 45 minutes, depending on the game, after every game to update my stuff. That is just prepping for the next game that I'm doing. And then I share it because people seem to like it or it's relevant. And I've always been a fan of TV graphics. And what occurred to me right away, as long as I decided to stay radio, which is a word I'm trying to get myself not to say, because that's a word like Betamax that's going to drop from the lexicon too. But as long as I stayed on the non-picture side, on the Celtics broadcast network side, that we don't have graphics. So those supplement the game. And then the third and final part of that, people say to me, how do you do all that? How do you do that during games and whatever? The answer to that is we had video games when we were kids. Remember when you got really, really good at a video game. So you'd start doing things to make it harder for yourself.
Yeah.
That's how I do the stuff. Like during the game, sometimes a job you've had for 20 something years isn't always the most challenging job. So if I can make it more, if I can juggle some plates while I'm doing it at the same time, while I'm calling a game from the corner where you can't actually see the court, let me see if I can do that and update the thing. And it's fun for me if I can call the game and then tweet something before Jay King does it when he's just sitting there doing nothing, then that's a win for me. Like sometimes I remember him once saying, "Hey, I did that thing 8 seconds before you." I'm like, "Yeah, and were you calling the game at the same time?" Like, come on, there's levels to this. So it's become right. It's just it's a fun game, but it's interesting to me because perception. You have to be aware of how people perceive you, and I realize people. Oh yeah, Grandy's got all those great stats. And I'm like, yeah, because they're part of prepping for the broadcast. But then you realize again, size of the broadcast audience, size of the, once that stuff starts pinballing around out there, and some of that early stuff I did, like when Kevin Garnett got to 25,000 points, all of a sudden you realize when that thing hits the Twitterverse, especially back in the day, it was just, it was flying all around the world.
This is like a song that has been written for a reason, and then it becomes popular and people play it for a different reason. It's not your song anymore. It's like Born in the USA. It's like, that's not what that song is about.
Not an uplifting, happy song.
Yeah, it's not. But man, it's played at all these political rallies, and that no one cares. Like whatever your intent was, doesn't matter. It's here now, and once it's out there and the people have put their hands on it, it's whatever they make of it. That's what this sounds like. I did one of my favorite games to cover was the one game I got to. You handed me a headset last season, 2 seasons ago, and I listened to your broadcast live, and that was the best, because when I'm covering a game, I'm sitting there, like if I'm at home, like I cover a lot of road games at home now, so I get to watch and I get to hear the something as simple as, oh, it's a 10-2 run, like, oh, okay, that's right, 10-2 run, got it, because I might in the moment miss exactly what that run is, but like I could be like, Celtics scored a few points here. I don't remember Orlando scoring recently. And somebody says that, like, okay, yes, I got to make a note. This was the 10-2 run. And just to hear somebody else, it's funny because you mentioned that Steve Ashburner thing. It's like we're all looking to each other to be like, did I get that right? And like, I'm listening. Like, I like to have your voice while I'm watching something live, just to narrate what I'm watching, just to make sure, like, oh yeah, that's right, he did do that. That was like one of my favorite games to cover. So
it's really, I just did that with we were talking about Noah Delzell recently, before we started, and she did it in Phoenix. She was happened to be sitting next to me, so I always offer the headphones. It's fun to have an audience, by the way, because we don't have an audience. If we have 100,000 people listening, it's an invisible, imaginary audience. And it was really funny at the end. And we have fun with her sometimes because she is younger than us. And literally she'll be like
significantly younger.
Yeah. Pretty funny story about when Mike Tirico came to, Mike Tirico is a great friend of mine. And he came to do that game. And it was before that. And I was like, hey, Mike Tirico's coming. And she's like, who? I'm like, oh, okay. So I know it hurts. Like sometimes there are things she says sometimes and my back just starts hurting when she that's rough. But when it's, she's like, this is great. This is awesome. Like, how do I hear this? Like we do this, and it's been a long-standing joke of mine about we do this every day. Like for years, people, and I recognize the path I had chosen. Particularly 2 years ago, it was not an easy choice. And I recognize the difficulty that comes with it, and the anonymity that comes with making this choice and being on this side of things. But it's really funny when they always have a story about how they listened. Hey, I was stuck in the car and I heard you guys, or my cable went out, so I heard you guys. And I'm like, we do this every day. We're here every day. You don't have to have an excuse. You don't have to have a reason. And it's just the contrast of the two sports. When I did the Red Sox that one year with Joe Castiglione, and Joe for 3 decades got to be the voice of summer barbecues and days at the beach. And Max and I for 25 years have been the voice of scraping off your car in the middle of winter. And it's just different, you know. So I get it, but it is kind of funny once in a while to it's fun to have an audience so your jokes can land.
That's right. You want some feedback on. Yeah.
As I said, I'll tell you, one of the first people came to visit before it was sort of like around our first date. I don't remember, but my future wife had similar. So she came and sat with us. We were in Orlando and she had the headphones on. So I'm like, well, here's my chance to work it. And I told my favorite stat. You want a stat? Cause I'm the stat guy. Here's the best stat I've had in 27 years in the NBA, my all-time favorite, and nothing will ever top it. So you remember the year that Chris Humphries was dating Kim Kardashian.
Yeah.
He was on the cover of People magazine, Us Weekly. He was the guy. He was in the center of every single thing that happened. And then she dumped him, right? Yeah. She literally breaks it. She breaks it off with him, and he's the guy. He has to go through this. That year, he led the league. He had his shot blocked more than any other player in the NBA that coming season. So after the year he just went through, with the entire world watching Kim Kardashian breaking up with him, dude literally led the league in getting rejected. Nothing will ever that is the best stat. If I'm the stat guy, take that. That's the best stat of all. About 20 years.
That's amazing.
And then later became a Celtic. I'm pretty convinced that's why she became I think I had her at that. I had her at that moment. I had her at Kim Kardashian.
I mean, how do you even find that? So how do you even figure that out?
Well, I remember just stumbling. Blocked attempts was a thing back before we got into offensive rating and advanced metrics and all the craziness you can do now, and you can go down some serious rabbit holes. Now, but getting your shot blocked was a blocked attempts. I think that's still a thing you can still find. Nobody who gets a shot blocked anymore because they're all threes. So all those stats have gone away. It's like when you talk about the historic year that the Celtics had in Cleveland and OKC, everyone's like, well, there's more points being. Yes, I know there's more points being scored. We talk about it on the broadcast quite a bit, but there's never been 3 teams that have had a year like this at the same time. And that's what makes it historic. And by the way, OKC didn't squeeze by this. There's just 2,000 teams in the history of the league, and they're now number 1 by a wide margin. Yeah, the game has changed. Yes, there are more points being scored, but come on. This is one of the most dominant teams we've ever seen. And you got to appreciate it. Everybody wants to downplay what's happening in real time and romanticize about what was. Right? Like the new Big 3 era, man. I did every single game with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo. Go watch those games now when they're Rondo's bouncing the ball for 20 seconds. And tell me it's not a better game now. It is.
So much of that is about expectations.
Sure.
No one expected the OKC Thunder to win 68 games. So it's something's off.
And no one thinks they're going to win the same way. One of the few times I've definitely been right over the years was in 2015. I kept telling Max all year the Golden State was going to win. And he was like, no, teams like that don't win. I'm like, you're saying that because teams like that haven't won yet. And by the way, Golden State was the number 1 defensive team in the league that year in 2015. And I think it's hard, but no one wants to pick OKC right now because they haven't won yet. Same way people weren't comfortable about the Celtics a year ago. When I kept saying over and over, there's a quote of mine that got pulled, obviously, that I said like in late February or March, like, what if it's not going to be hard? You had 2 years of winning 8 elimination games. The Celtics won 8 elimination games in 2022 and 2023, which is insane. And I remember saying at the end of February, late March, what if it's not going to be like that? What if they walk back? What if there are no game 6s or game 7? And that's what happened because the Celtics were historically good and nobody else was close. The only reason to be skeptical about OKC and Cleveland this year, or the only reason to be skeptical about OKC is because the other 2 teams exist.
Yeah.
The reason to be skeptical about Cleveland is because Boston's in the East. The reason to be skeptical about Boston is that two teams had better years than they did, which is, all the stats you ran the other night. That's the only problem with this Celtics season, which compares favorably to most teams that have won the championship, is the fact that you have OKC this year, Cleveland this year, and last year's Celtics, who all had better years. And so it's like it's the fourth musketeer of those 4 seasons. But it was, as you like to say, it was pretty damn good.
It was a pretty damn good season. So let's get into this season, because it was a 61-win season where they were the second best offense in the league overall, the 4th best defense in the league, and the second best net rating in the league by the end. Is an incredible season. Now, OKC is 3.3 points better in net rating. They're the number 1 defense and the number 3 offense by a tick. But by any measure, this Celtics team is a hell of a team, and a team that I think, because of what happened in December and January, people kind of like, I don't know. And because OKC and Cleveland exist, there's like that, like you just mentioned, like, I don't know. But take all that aside, just throw that away for a moment. What the Celtics did this year after what they did last year is pretty incredible, I think.
With Porzingis missing half the year, Jaylen, who knows his situation right now, and obviously he missed 20 games. Jayson Tatum, as my son would say, low key, missed 10 games this year, and there were a lot of nights. And the Tatum Giannis thing is interesting, because even I've had to concede. I was a strong when everybody was just seeding Giannis the 3rd spot, and what would be in the MVP voting, and what would be the de facto. We don't have it in the NBA like we have it in the NFL and in Major League Baseball. If each conference had an MVP, it would have been a fascinating debate all year with Tatum and Giannis. I felt Tatum a month ago was clear-cut Eastern Conference MVP and was clear-cut 3rd guy, because Giannis was missing a bunch of games. But, man, that dude, he came down the stretch like a thoroughbred, and I think there's no circumstance by which Giannis doesn't get the 3rd spot. But the Celtics did all that with with everybody getting up for him with the target on their back, or what is the quote that Joe's going to, I think, live with the laser beam on
that red dot on my forehead.
The red dot. And that was real, by the way. That's what happens when Golden State, for all the years that they were the team. Like a lot of these teams, you make their season, not at the end when everybody's playing capture the flag and this calamity of the last couple of months, which the NBA's got. It's easy to say, oh, they got to fix it. And we do as a league. We do have to fix it. It's a lot easier said than done, but this was it's gotten much worse, not just with the draft picks being, protected. The protected picks, that's really making a mess of this last season where it's just, I talked to too many people, and here's part of the job you don't see. How many Celtic fans did I talk to in Orlando who bought tickets and, no knock on Baylor Shireman or Torrey Craig, who had that amazing game the other day, but that's not why parents bought tickets for their kids for the Boston visit to Orlando.
Yeah,
late in the year, and it's unfortunate. We had a trip. So I've been here as long as we've just discussed. I'm now old, and I've been here a really long time. And this last road trip, I'll tell you this: I signed more autographs and took more selfies in Utah and Portland in those games than in any individual games I've done home or away for this team in 20-something years. That is how insane that road trip. There should be a 30 for 30 about that road trip. Where every night we get there, there'd be 5,000 Celtic fans who were in there when the gates opened, just to see warm-ups. They come over and to see Max and see, obviously Scal. Scal's the Pied Piper when you walk through these buildings. I'll tell you about what I thought was going to be a near-death experience going to see Scal play that game in the playground on 4th Street a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I grew up. I grew up 2 blocks from there, so I was not going to miss it. I knew what was coming. I went. My father took me to the 4th Street playground when I was a kid to watch the real players in New York play, because it wasn't the Rucker, but it was basically the number 2, cage in the city. And as that was going on, I was like I was inside the cage. I was like inching towards the door, like in case I had to get out like quick, because we were closing in on a riot. But the fans pack the place, make noise during the game. They get shouted down by the home team. And then the Celtics would chase the home team fans away, win the game going away. And by the end of like every one of these games, it was just Celtic fans left in the building cheering on another Boston win. So again, part of my job is to wave the flag and say, look at what's happening now. Be in the now. Don't say, oh, Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. Like when Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce were here, I was saying, don't say Larry Bird and Kevin McHale. Watch every episode of Celtic City and do it knowing that you're in it now. It's happening again. This is it. And by the way, I don't know, was it you was talking about the new Big Three team and making a compare? This group has been better. This group has been the new Big Three era, which obviously is one of the first ones that I really documented extensively because I did all of those games. That was a year and that was 130 games until Garnett got hurt, where they were as good as anybody had ever been. Then there was the second phase from the Garnett injury to the Perk trade.
Mm-hmm.
They were good. And then there was the last year and a half, which they were a 500 team. They were more of a basketball museum than a real contender. It was like, hey, come see Ray Allen in his natural state. That's what it was towards the end. And as I said, I think I'd probably say that maybe in the future episode of Celtic City, the clock on the new Big Three era started ticking the day it started because all those guys were 30.
Yeah.
30, 31, and 32. Think about that with Jaylen and Jayson right now. That they were, and even Porzingis, they were 30, 31, and 32 when that started at a time that guys weren't playing as long 15 years ago. But this has exceeded it. That's if the new Big Three era is looked at historically much different if Derrick Rose doesn't tear his ACL and they make that run in 2012. Because if they go out early in 2011, like quick dispatch of the second round by Miami, Chicago takes them out in 2012, and they go out in the first round with the Knicks in 2013. That fifth year, that's really critical to how that era is remembered. And there's the Chicago one. That was one of the great teams. That was a 60-win team that had a huge scoring difference. That was a dominant team in Chicago. And then when Derrick Rose got hurt, they lost Philadelphia, and that gave us the Uncut Gems series, the Boston Philadelphia second round series.
So I like the comparison because I've said this, I've written about it. I've said enjoy this because these are the good old days. The good old days are happening in real time right now. Enjoy them. If you are a Tatum, if you understand what Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are and what they've been, what they've done, what they've accomplished prior to even winning the championship. I was joking around like we just watched the Celtics dispatch the Charlotte Hornets. And I'm like, imagine your season as a beat writer. Just imagine your season being over right now. Imagine being able to be like, okay, I'm going to take a vacation with my family. We're going to do exit interviews. And then we're just going to be like, okay, we're getting into pre-draft workouts and that's it. Like right now in 3 or 4 years, maybe even, the Celtic season will be over. And this podcast will be, okay, who looks good in the draft? I'll have to start watching college basketball again. I'll have to know who all these guys are. I don't have to know that now because it doesn't matter for the Boston Celtics. Like, I didn't know Baylor Shireman before he got here. All I needed to know is what he's doing this season, right? So what the Celtics are doing, what these guys have done has been, when you look at it, so many deep playoff runs. They've only missed the playoffs once in what? How many years? 10, 12, 50, whatever it is?
More than, going back to 07. They only missed in 14 in Brad's first year. So
right. Okay.
Where are we? 17, 2007, 17 out of 18 or 16 out of 17.
Something like that's crazy.
It is.
And only one first round exit since then. Is that right?
15, they went out. They got swept in the first round of 15. 16, they got screwed by the electoral math of the tiebreaker, and they had to play Al Horford in Atlanta in the first round, which they shouldn't have had to, and they lost there. And then there was the 21,
okay,
the 21 series, which I often referenced it last year if they won a championship. When you talk about Brad Stevens' last game, we didn't know at the time, but it was going to be the last game he coached. Romeo Langford, Tristan Thompson, somebody else started in that game. Started. Yeah. That's where the Celtics were 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then the next year, go to the
final. That was the one. That was the only one in the Tatum era. That was only the first. That was the only first round exit in the Tatum era.
Because Kemba got hurt. We saw Kemba over the weekend. Kemba never got to play. Kemba Walker dreamed of being a Celtic his whole life. Never got to play in a home playoff game in front of fans.
That's right, because that was a COVID year.
Hurt. Second year he was hurt, and the first year was the bubble.
That's a shame. But this Celtics team has been incredible. And I just, you bring up 08 and that team, because, well, first of all, the prior year was so bad that this was like Kevin Garnett was the savior, and Ray Allen, they had assembled a team that was supposed to be good. And it's a bunch of new guys. It's like, okay, here we go. Boom, we're making our run. And everybody buys in right away. They have long histories. And it didn't matter that they didn't get the job done then prior to getting here. Getting to Boston, being put together, this was a whole new thing. Boston's back, baby. And everybody bought into it. They're supposed to be good. They won a championship. Awesome. Tatum, Brown had great runs that Charlotte would love. They would sign up for that run right now. That kind of playoff success. But because they had that playoff success without winning a championship, you had the questions about Tatum. There was always skepticism. Last year when they got Porzingis and Holiday, it was always, okay, that's great, but, and all the local radio folks and all the talking heads were, yeah, but Tatum can't get the job done, and Jaylen can't get the job done. This isn't and you throw in the Joe Mazzulla, the Miami series and all of that stuff, and nothing but skepticism, it felt like. And the win was like, okay, yeah, all right, okay, they are good, actually. And now this year, I think people are starting to get into the, okay, yeah, this is, we're kind of like, it's learning to ride a bike again, and it's still shaky. We're riding it, but there's still not that 08 feeling of like, this is a dominant team. This is a team that's supposed to win. And I think even within Celtics fandom, there's still, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a social media thing that in comment sections that I wasn't exposed to back then, that I am exposed to now. That's making me see more doubt than there was. Maybe there was doubt back then, but it just feels like people aren't fully like cocky about this team like they were in the past.
How would social media have dealt with the Celtics going to Game 7 with Atlanta?
Right, exactly.
In the first round. It's hard to compare because that 08 team just dripped swagger and style, and Kevin Garnett and Boston were two soulmates that found each other, that were destined to be together and found each other, even though they'd been in the league. Nobody ever made that connection. I remember people say, "Oh, Boston's not going to be good for Kevin Garnett," and I was like, "What?" And I was the one sort of, obviously, I was the one sort of banging that drum, because forgotten part of history that I will never let be forgotten is that a Boston Herald poll in 2007 said, "Would you trade Al Jefferson for Kevin Garnett?" And 80% of the people said no, including, of course. And by the way, to say that you're not alone, the aforementioned, Super Sky Point to a man who I was so privileged to learn from and to spend time with and to spend so many years with, Tommy Heinsohn. Tommy said, if we trade Al Jefferson for Kevin Garnett, I'll quit. That's how much pushback there was. And I just remember thinking, now I had been with him in Minnesota for 3 years, and which, by the way, it makes me think of this whenever you talk about what this team has done. The Celtics obviously have a pretty good chance to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. You would think logic would dictate they've got a great shot to get there. If they do it, Jaylen Brown will have gone to 7 conference finals in 9 years. 7. I've worked for one other team in the NBA, and that was the Timberwolves. The Minnesota Timberwolves have been to 2 conference finals in their franchise history. Last year they got to Game 5. In 2004, they got to Game 6 of the conference finals. That is it. And people say, well, Minnesota's an expansion team. No, they're not. You're older than you think you are, and Minnesota has been here for 36, 37 years now.
Yeah.
And they've been to the conference finals twice. So I get that people sort of spit on it here. Oh, the conference finals. If the Celtics lose to Cleveland in the conference finals, people are going to throw themselves off the Tobin Bridge, right? Like what a disaster when you've already had years here where you've been the third best team. That was the difference between when I got here. Or when I came here, the Celtics had missed the playoffs 6 years in a row and then went to the conference finals, and people wanted to have a parade for that team. And Boston, as you know, it was such loserville around here. There actually had been a parade for a player that won a championship in another city.
Yeah.
There was a parade for Ray Bork because he won a championship for somebody else, but Boston wanted to have a parade so much. And who could have envisioned 6 Super Bowls and 4 World Series and now 2 NBA titles and the Bruins winning the Stanley Cup and it all happening in the gleam of light? So there are, people a lot of people that listen to podcasts who don't. Or did you hear me I went into my Hoop Collective thing there, more Hoop Collective podcast. There are people who have no experience with real life, with what it's like in the NBA. And how many of these nights, how many of these teams have we seen here? Charlotte and Washington and even Portland. You feel good if you're a Blazer fan about the year you've had, which had 30-something wins in it. And the fact that the rebuilding process here took a year and a half is insane because in 2013, when everything happened and the era ended, it seemed, when you start over, the reason Doc didn't want any part of it is because who knows if you're ever going to make it back when you go to the bottom. And to do it in a year and a half was just not fair.
No, I mean, thank you, Isaiah Thomas, and thank you, Brad Stevens, and thank you, a lot of these guys.
Well, the really thing, I'll give you my other bit that's been making the rounds is that now that Celtic City is a big thing and it's a big nostalgia thing, and we love seeing Kevin McHale, obviously. But I like to point out now that Kevin is now the second most important McHale in Celtics history because Mikhail Prokhorov is the one who signed off on the deal that replenished.
I'm like, where's he going with it?
Everybody does that. I can't figure this one out. But yeah. That that deal was a miracle. It's a miracle that happened.
I remember doing a podcast prior to the reigning Jays, the BAA to the NBA as that was the precursor to this. But before that, I was doing Celtic stuff live with John Duke.
Yes, that's where I used to do my heel Grande bit.
Yeah, I do. I did that. I did that show for a little bit, and I remember when that trade happened, I was like, "Listen, there's a best case scenario here where they bottom out in time for those picks to be pretty good." And I remember being like, listen, it's okay. It's a good trade. It's a decent trade. They got a lot of stuff. The unprotected is really important here. If these guys don't have more than a year or two left in them, this could be something special. And it worked out perfectly. So you're 100% correct.
This was the trade Danny wanted Red to make in the late 80s. These were the trades. So trade McHale, trade Bird. And Red wouldn't do it. And that scarred Danny. Danny was just bound to determine. That's why there were all those rumors about Ray all those years. Because Danny was not going to let it happen. And if you asked him in an honest moment, he thought the window had probably closed and that they were sort of resigned to it. And then like a shining steed comes Mikhail Prokhorov and the Nets trying to make a splash. And they thought they were getting 2007 Garnett and Pierce, and obviously they weren't.
It's incredible.
It's
how much. This goes to what Joe Mazzulla says, that there are things like winning is a certain percentage of stuff that you can control and a certain percentage of stuff you cannot control at all. And you need those things to work out in your favor in order to win a championship, and expand that out in order to build a champion, because any normal owner wouldn't do that deal the same way. But Prokhorov comes in and is like this big Russian oligarch, and they put up the billboard across the street from the New York Knicks offices, and they're trying to take over New York, and Jay-Z is involved, and all this, like, all of this craziness happens, and like, you need a brash owner to not care, like, just whatever, no protections, yeah, sure, no protections, whatever, who cares? And it does speak to the luck you need, the luck. Joe will bring this up every time he talks about the Indiana Pacers series, them not calling a timeout in that game one. Yeah. So the steal doesn't happen, or the steal doesn't happen in the backcourt, and Jaylen doesn't get that three. And who knows how the series goes if a couple of things go different. Maybe it's, instead of a sweep, it's a 7-game series. Maybe they lose. Because the Pacers are just so crazy. Like, all of those games were like 3, 4, 5-point games. So you need some luck, and they're going to need some luck this year. They're going to need some luck along the way for sure.
I just realized, by the way, that Prokhorov is Russian for Ishbia. By the way, when Ishbia said that, what did he say, 24 or 25 teams would trade places with us, and he's gotten a lot of grief for saying that. But it occurred to me, I think people are being unfair to him. I think he meant 25 teams all time. Like the 2012 Primo Brezic Bobcats and the 99 Keith Kloss Clippers, they would trade. I think he meant all time, like in the history of the league.
Oh, yeah.
Trade places with them, and not
ask him to clarify that.
As opposed to,
had to be, because
25. Yeah. Am I giving you enough stuff for the aggregators to enough?
This is, you give me so much stuff. I'm getting 2 episodes out of this show now. I get the mandate, the lockdown mandated 30-minute show, and then the deep cut lockdown after dark show.
But here's what you want. I mean, the Celtics have they have a real good shot here. I think OKC is I think Cleveland's great. I'm not gonna be surprised if anybody wins, if any of those 3 teams win. And I think there are specific matchups. The only thing that concerns me for OKC, the only little morsel I have, is the Clippers beating Denver. The Clippers series in the second round could be interesting. But, because Kawhi, you didn't have a team. The Clippers all year didn't have Kawhi and Harden and Zubats has been amazing all year. He's third team all NBA guy. It's close. There's a lot of those guys, but I think that could be really interesting. The biggest thing that's being unsaid now, and Max refused to say it out loud. I tried to goad him into it, and he wouldn't say it. If Cleveland, they've been the best team in the East all year. If Cleveland doesn't go to the NBA Finals, which Eastern team, John, is the most likely one to go? It's obviously the Celtics, right?
Yes.
In the Western Conference, if the Thunder don't make it.
Oh. I was having this conversation with a bunch of people at dinner before a game. Like,
this could happen. I don't think it's going to, but my God, in this unprecedented year of nostalgia with the documentary going on, it's not crazy. Yeah. And there are similarities to 2008 when obviously Luka is not Pau Gasol, but remember in 2008, the Lakers were not a contender when that season started. You know who the team was that year? It was Utah. That Darren Williams Boozer team in Utah, they were really, really good. They had great games against the Celtics that year. The Lakers were not considered a contender for the Western Conference title at the start of the year, but then they got Gasol, had the great second half, and then all of a sudden, there we were, with 2 Celtic-Laker finals in 3 years. And I'm off. Okay, when I see OKC beaten 4 times, I'll believe it.
Yeah,
but this is not.
It's not out of the question.
It's not
out of the question.
Nor is, if you have the Celtics in the finals in the East, when they came in January, I'm not a gambling. I know that everything's driven by gambling. As I adored my years doing the games with Scal and Abby. I loved every second of it. But the gambling stuff has gotten so out of control that it's literally like, hey, this 3 of the air is brought to you by Joe. I'm like, can we get a little set? And I get it, but I'm not a gambling person that way. But you can't help but pay attention to some things. And when Houston came in January, it was something like a Boston-Houston final was like 38-1.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a gambling person, but I'm like, that seems way too high for something that, because I've seen Ime. I know that Ime could take a young team to the finals because I saw it. I was there. And so it just seemed like that's not crazy either. If OKC doesn't get there, who will? But my God, it's not crazy that the Lakers, this is not a wild 100-1 shot.
No, it's not crazy at all.
Your nostalgia could happen.
It would be nuts for it to be Celtics Lakers. I mean, it would be. Listen, I would be happy. I would love to see it, and having the Celtics beat the Lakers. My God, poor Luka, just coming to Boston twice with 2 different teams and just getting bounced twice.
I thought there was a real moment in history last year. I just felt like Luka was having that series like Tatum had against Golden State, or that guys have had over the years where LeBron in 2007, going to the finals against the Spurs. That's what it struck me as most, that you knew Luka was going to get back there one day. And he's going to be doing interviews with Malika. And at the time I said this, I was thinking it wasn't going to be next year in the Lakers, but 5 years down the road, when Luka gets back to the finals, he'll be doing this sit-down interview with Malika about, back in 2024, I just wasn't emotionally ready for that stage. And they were a great, Celtics were a great team that year. And you could see it coming. It's just part of history. It's just sort of the same thing happening over and over, but not in anybody's wildest dreams. Anybody's wildest dreams, including Rob Pelinka's, that this could happen the way it happened.
That would be something. And I said poor Luka. Luka will be fine. Poor Dallas Mavericks fans. Like, imagine the Dallas Mavericks fans watching that happen. Poor Nico Harrison, who probably gets everything he deserves in terms of, like,
after the great year he had last year. Look at what he did last year with that team. It's amazing. PJ Washington, like he was having a Brad Stevens year. He was just, Brad for years have been talking about just hit singles. And then Brad for 4 years in this job has just been driving it into the gap.
Yeah.
Everything he touches.
Well,
and Nico was like that last year.
Yeah. Not this year though.
Well, they say time will tell. And of course it won't, because we'll never know if Luka was going to opt out. Number one, we'll never know. But really, history is going to judge this as the first ownership to push back against the automatic giving a guy the supermax.
Right. And it's going to go so horribly that no other ownership is going to do it again.
That is very possible. But you just don't give away one of the best 5 players. Get Austin Reeves back, for God's sakes. I mean, they didn't even get what they could get. Like, who knows what they could have gotten? Well, we didn't want to shop them. Right. Why would you want to get the best price possible?
Right. That's just the dumbest part. That, to me, that's the malpractice right there. I don't want to derail the whole thing, but you want to move Luka? I get it. Having watched him in the finals, I get it. You don't buy into him as your 100% future star. Then shop him. Don't just go to the Lakers. Even if you do just go to the Lakers, pump them for all of the stuff that they like. Threaten the Lakers to be like, all right, if that's all you're going to give me, then I'll just go shop them.
And here's the problem with the decision that they made, and I'll tie it back to the Celtics this way. If you look at Paul Pierce in 2002, had this nasty experience with the World Championship team with George Karl, and became this malcontent that people, I don't know about this Paul Pierce. In 2005, he gets himself tossed out of a must-win playoff game in Indiana and shows up at the press conference with the Jacob Marley, my tooth out, knocked my tooth out. And he was a lot older then than Luka is now. And would you have given Paul the equivalent of the Supermax at that point and said, this is the franchise guy? So how about a little bit of patience? The dude is a year younger than Tatum. He's a year younger than Tatum, and he is otherworldly. It's inexplicable, and particularly dangerous in an age in which more and more kids watching the NBA are following players and not teams.
Yeah.
And are more than willing to, I'm going to just get a different color Luka jersey and root for that team now. And this comes from Europe, and it comes from soccer players that people follow the soccer players. I'm a Ronaldo fan. And even not knowing, even if Ronaldo plays here now, okay, I'm going to be Ronaldo fan here. Messi comes here last year to toy with Americans, and people are going to be Messi fans. So people are going to be Luka fans.
Yeah.
But how did the Lakers keep getting? Just keep getting rejuvenated.
Let's end it with this. If there was, just give me your biggest takeaway. Just your biggest takeaway from this season.
Professionalism. Focus on the task. Unfazed by, Porzingis and Jaylen Brown are out tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
No big deal. The year that Tatum had was spectacular because if I close my eyes, if you're driving, don't do that. But you close your eyes, you can picture Tatum. How many third quarters was Tatum out there with Shireman, Drew Peterson, Kada, and it's all part of this MVP count. Listen, this is the SGA Jokic year. I'm no longer. It's funny. A month ago, I thought Tatum was a solid third Eastern Conference MVP, and clearly that's Giannis now. A month ago, I was convinced that SGA was going to win and win big. I'm not sure anymore. Yeah. I'm not sure anymore that these games Jokic has had late, but I hope people appreciate the year that Tatum had because you are witnessing a generational Celtic who has a great chance to be, he's climbing this list to do it in Madison Square Garden. That was one of my favorite moments because, listen, every game I do in that, I grew up in that building. People know that. That's a cathedral to me. And if Jayson Tatum go into the top 10 in Celtics history with a 40-point night at Madison Square Garden, and that people ask me why I made the choice I made is to do the games that matter. Those are the games that matter, the Saturday night ABC games and the playoff games. But that was a signature moment in this year that Tatum had, which was one of the greatest Celtics of all time at the height of his powers. And if you don't think he is, take a step back and realize you are in the middle of watching Bird and Havlicek and the Jays are these guys for the era. And Tatum's still doing this at a pretty impossible young age. And I think the documentary about them in 20 years, which is my primary takeaway about this year and these last couple of years, is Jaylen and Jayson as men, as young men. And it blows my mind at 22 and 23 and 24, the lives they had off the court. I love the duality of Jaylen's life off the court and Jayson's life off the court. I love how there's that little bit of, I think they have sort of an envy of the other a little bit. Mm-hmm. When Jaylen sees Jayson with the kids and with Deuce and whatever. And Jayson, I think if time allowed, he'd be a little bit more socially active the way that Jaylen, it's a fascinating, it's as feel good a combination as this team has ever had. And this team has had some over the years. And it's funny, Celtic City's putting a light on the fact that it wasn't always, Bird and McHale weren't best friends. They weren't whatever. Robert Parrish obviously didn't help Lowry in the fight. That was the big takeaway from the fifth episode. There was always issues. There's a great soundbite from Kuzi about he wished he had felt Bill Russell's pain more. Yeah. When they were teammates. And I think, to watch these guys together, again, the older you get. When I came in the league, half the players were older than me. Now you get older and you become a father yourself and you just have a great appreciation for them doing this at the highest level, carrying on this tradition of that we're getting to sort of enjoy every Monday night, with the documentary, and that in real time, that this season, I'm big on appreciating. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe Karl Anthony Towns goes berserk in the second round and scores 40 in every game. Stuff it's not going to happen. But what if it did?
What if it did?
Then this season, people are going to spit on it. And so right now, take this 82 game body of work and enjoy every night the way older fans wished they had appreciated the 80s more, when the Celtics were winning every night at Boston Garden and you got to watch, see Larry play every night. Be in this moment, look at these other teams in the league and say, there, but for the grace of Prokhorov.
Great place to end.
The original Ishbia.
The original Ishbia.
You didn't think you'd get a Keith Kloss mention in here, did you?
Did not expect that one. That was not on my bingo card. No. Sean Grande, appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Anytime, man.